If you really trusted me, you wouldn't need to ask. David said it on an evening that should have been perfectly ordinary. He wasn't angry. He wasn't irritated. He just slipped the words out casually while fastening his watch, as if the sentence had no weight at all. But the calmness in his voice made something sink inside Elena's chest, a quiet, heavy drop of dread she couldn't name yet. She hadn't accused him of anything. All she'd said was, "You're coming home late a lot lately. Is everything okay?" It was a soft question, a worried wife checking in. Yet his answer felt like a wall being built brick by brick between them. Elena wasn't the paranoid type. If anything, she trusted too easily. For 7 years of marriage, she had never once felt the need to question David's whereabouts, his co-workers, his friends, or his late evenings. Their marriage had been through storms far greater than misunderstandings, especially the 3 miscarriages that pulled them into an emotional darkness neither of them knew how to escape. Those losses changed everything. The way they spoke, the way they touched, the way they looked at their future. Silence became their default language, and distance grew in the spaces where dreams used to sit. So when David started drifting, coming home late, guarding his phone, changing his cologne, mumbling vague excuses about meetings running long, Elena told herself he was simply stressed, overworked, tired. She needed to believe that. Sometimes belief is the only rope a person has left, even when it's already fraying. But things shifted when Rachel came back into the picture. Rachel Carter, Elena's older sister, had just gone through a brutal divorce. She was emotionally fragile, bouncing between anger and despair, and Elena did everything she could to be there for her. She cooked for her, visited her after work, invited her over for movie nights. They were sisters, but after the divorce, they felt like 2 women clinging to each other just to stay afloat. Rachel had always been dramatic, emotional, expressive, the opposite of Elena's quiet steadiness. And after the divorce, she leaned even harder on Elena. One night, she said she wanted to stay at Elena's house for a few days, just to clear my head. Elena agreed immediately, but when she mentioned it to David, he hesitated. A small pause, barely a second, but enough. "Maybe not this week," he said while brushing his teeth. "Work's crazy, and I'll barely be home." It'd be awkward for her. Awkward. A strange word, Elena thought at the time. But she brushed it off. Looking back, that was the first real red flag, and the first one she ignored. Then came the little things. Small, harmless details that felt insignificant on their own, but started forming a pattern Elena didn't want to acknowledge. There was the new scent on David's clothes. Not his usual cologne, something floral, expensive, soft but lingering. A scent Elena recognized from somewhere, though she couldn't place it at first. Then came the hotel receipt she found in David's jeans pocket while doing laundry. A room service bill from the Royal Crest Hotel. No name printed, just the suite number and a total that made her blink. When she asked David, he shrugged and said he took a client out. She believed him, because that's what trusting spouses do. There were the late-night texts, the screen tilted slightly away from her. The way David would smile at his phone. A smile she hadn't seen directed at herself in months. There were Rachel's odd messages, too. Messages that didn't make sense. One especially stood out. "You ever feel like people aren't who you think they are?" Elena had sent back a laughing emoji, thinking Rachel was just having another emotional episode. Rachel never replied. Then came the memory, a small moment from a Sunday afternoon months earlier. Rachel had brought over mango juice and fried rice. They sat on the balcony with David, talking about childhood stories. At one point Rachel reached over and brushed something off David's shoulder. It was innocent, harmless. Elena didn't think twice. But now, replaying it, something about that moment felt wrong. Too familiar, too casual, too comfortable. Still, she pushed the thought away. It was her sister, her own blood, and David had been her rock for years. Suspicion felt like betrayal. But denial can't protect a person forever. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. Elena's laptop froze right before an important Zoom meeting. She asked if she could use David's instead. He hesitated, again, just a second, then nodded and told her it was on the dining table. His password was still her birthday. She smiled for half a heartbeat, foolishly thinking that meant something. The meeting started. She kept her camera off, took notes, focused on work, until a soft notification ping appeared at the corner of the screen. Royal Crest Suite. Reservation confirmed. The name hit her like a quiet blow. Royal Crest. She knew she'd heard that before. She clicked without thinking. The email opened. 2 nights. Champagne services. Check-in last weekend. The same weekend David claimed he had a strategy meeting. Her fingers turned cold. Attached were photos. The first was the suite, golden pillows, a rose on the bed. The second was David, shirtless, smiling lazily into the camera. Elena felt her breath lock in her throat. But the third photo, that one stole the air completely. A woman sat beside him in the bed, hair cascading in soft chestnut waves, holding a glass of wine. Only half her face showed, but Elena recognized the silver anklet, the shoulder-length hair, the curve of her jaw. She recognized everything. It was Rachel, her sister, her only sister, the woman she had comforted through an entire divorce, the woman she trusted more than anyone. For 10 full seconds, Elena didn't breathe. Her eyes burned, but no tears fell, not yet. She just stared until the screen dimmed and faded into a screensaver. Her heart didn't break suddenly. It cracked quietly, like thin ice under too much weight. She closed the email slowly, her hands trembling but her face eerily calm. And as she set the laptop down, one thought echoed like a dull drumbeat. She needed the truth, the whole truth, before everything collapsed. And that was the moment she knew. This was only the beginning. Elena didn't cry after seeing the photos. She simply closed the laptop, exhaled once, and let the silence settle around her like a heavy blanket. But silence has a way of sharpening memories, and in those next quiet minutes, her mind began stitching together every fragment she had ignored, one thread at a time. At first, the signs felt scattered. Small moments she had brushed aside now resurfaced like ghosts demanding attention. She remembered the weekends when Rachel suddenly needed space and turned off her phone. Elena used to worry Rachel was sinking into depression again, the kind that left her lying in bed for hours. But now those weekends lined up perfectly with David's so-called strategy meetings. She remembered the night Rachel promised to come over and keep her company when Elena had the flu. Rachel canceled last minute, saying she was too drained and needed rest. That same night, David didn't come home until almost midnight. He smelled freshly showered. Too freshly. She had noticed it, but didn't question it. She trusted him, and she didn't want to believe her sister would lie. Then there were the disappearances. Rachel vanishing for entire weekends. Rachel going silent for days. Rachel making excuses that sounded rehearsed now that Elena replayed them. Another thread fell into place. Then another. And another. By the time she stood up from the dining table, she already knew the truth was much larger than 3 photographs. She walked to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water, staring at the dark window where her own reflection looked back at her. Calm. Too calm. A version of herself she barely recognized. A woman watching her life fold in on itself, yet refusing to scream. That was when another thought hit her. The bank account. She grabbed her phone and logged into their joint account. Her fingers felt stiff, as if they already knew what she was about to see. The transactions loaded slowly, cruelly slowly, and then the list appeared. Fridays. Always Fridays. Large cash withdrawals. Every 2 to 3 weeks. For the last 3 months. The amounts were suspiciously close to what the Royal Crest typically charged for a suite. Elena's stomach tightened. These weren't coincidences. These were footprints. Footprints leading straight to a truth David had hoped she would never follow. She closed the banking app and stared at the wall, letting everything crash into place. There was only one missing piece, confirmation, and she wanted it from the source. The next afternoon, Elena drove to the Royal Crest Hotel. The lobby smelled of lilies and polished marble, the kind of place that whispered luxury and secrecy. She approached the front desk with a steady expression, pretending she was planning an anniversary surprise. "Hi," she said softly. "My husband and I were considering staying here next month. I heard you had some beautiful suites. Could I see what's available?" The receptionist, a young woman with a bright smile, nodded graciously. "Of course, ma'am. In fact, we recently hosted a lovely couple in our honeymoon suite, the Carters. They left just a few days ago. I could show you the same room." Elena didn't react outwardly, but inside, the words burned. The Carters. Her family name. Rachel's legal surname. The one she kept after her divorce. The receptionist turned her screen toward Elena and scrolled through photos of the suite. The same golden pillows. The same rose on the bed. The same lighting as in the photos she had seen in David's inbox. Would you like to reserve it? The receptionist asked. Elena smiled politely and shook her head. I'll check my schedule and return. Thank you. She walked out of the lobby with her pulse pounding in her ears. She didn't need more proof. She already knew. But something inside her, maybe justice, maybe pride, maybe the remnants of trust bleeding out, pushed her toward one final confirmation. David's phone. She waited until evening. Waited until David stepped into the shower. Waited for the water to run loud enough to cover her footsteps. She hadn't touched his phone in years. They never lived that way. But trust wasn't protection anymore. It was a cage. She found the phone on the bed beside his folded work clothes. Unlocked. Careless. Perhaps he thought she'd never look. Perhaps he believed she was still the woman who asked no questions. She opened his messages and browsed through names she didn't recognize. Clients. Colleagues. Random contacts. Then one thread caught her attention. Evelyn from work. A name that felt too generic. Too convenient. She opened it, and the room seemed to tilt. There were weeks of messages. Jokes, photos, plans, late-night conversations. But it wasn't the tone that destroyed her. It was the profile picture. A small, cropped image, but unmistakable. Rachel, laughing at her phone. Hair shorter than in the hotel photos. She'd cut it 2 weeks ago. Elena scrolled. Her hand trembled once. Just once. Then she found the message that shattered the last remaining sliver of denial. She doesn't suspect a thing. Can't wait for the weekend. Rachel's reply followed, cruel in its casualness. I miss you. Same place. Elena closed her eyes. Not in pain. That came later. But in a strange, icy clarity. She kept scrolling, absorbing every lie, every joke, every moment of intimacy they had shared behind her back. She took screenshots and emailed them to herself. She wasn't planning revenge, not the dramatic kind, but she needed proof. She needed to see the entire shape of the betrayal, no matter how much it cut. When the shower stopped, she placed the phone exactly where she found it and stepped out onto the balcony. The cool air hit her face, steadying her breathing. She was still calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes before a storm or before a decision. David came out minutes later, towel around his shoulders, smiling as if nothing in the world had shifted. You okay out here? He asked. Yes, Elena said softly. Just thinking. About what? Nothing important. He didn't hear the finality in her voice. Or maybe he did and chose to ignore it, the way he'd ignored everything else. That night, while he slept peacefully, Elena lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. The breathing of a man who believed his lies were safe. But they weren't. Because Elena understood something now, something sharp and undeniable. If she stayed silent, they would keep going. And that silence would destroy her long before it destroyed them. She turned her face toward the window, where the moonlight spilled across the floor and made the quietest, most decisive promise of her life. This wasn't the end. This was the turn. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay beside David listening to his calm, steady breathing. The rhythm of a man who believed he was safe. A man who never once imagined the truth could slip out from under him. By the time morning light filtered through the curtains, her decision had already settled inside her like stone. She didn't confront him. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why. Instead, she stood up quietly, packed a small overnight bag, and left the house before David woke up. The sun had barely risen when she got into her car, but the sky was bright enough for her to see the road clearly, something she couldn't say about the last few months of her marriage. The silence inside the car was loud, but it was a different kind of loudness. Not grief. Not shock. Clarity. Cold, steady clarity. She drove straight to her mother's house. Mrs. Carter opened the door before Elena even knocked twice. One look at her daughter's face, and she stepped aside without asking a single question. Elena walked inside, set down her bag, and finally allowed her body to sag into the old couch she grew up on. Her mother sat across from her, waiting. Elena tried to speak, but her throat tightened. A long moment passed before she finally whispered, Mom, it's David. And Rachel. Mrs. Carter didn't react immediately, but her eyes shifted, a deep, slow shift that held a truth Elena wasn't prepared for. What about them? Her mother asked quietly. Elena took out her phone and opened the screenshots. She didn't say a word as she handed it to her mother. Photos. Messages. Dates. All the evidence laid bare. Mrs. Carter stared at the screen for several seconds. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice did not when she finally said, "I knew something was wrong." Elena's head jerked up. "You knew?" Her mother closed the phone gently, as if the truth itself needed careful handling. "A few weeks ago, I saw them together by the market near the pharmacy. They weren't arguing. They weren't behaving like in-laws. Rachel was holding his arm. They looked comfortable. Too comfortable." The words landed with a dull thud, confirming everything Elena feared. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elena asked, her voice cracking just once. "I wasn't sure," her mother whispered. "And I didn't want to hurt you unless I knew. But seeing this, yes, I believe it now. Completely." Elena sat back. There it was, the final verification she hadn't even realized she needed. The betrayal wasn't imagined. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was real, tangible, ugly. Her mother reached over and squeezed her hand. "Listen to me, Elena. You don't need to react with anger. Anger makes people sloppy. You need to be smart. Whatever you choose to do next, let it be on your terms." Something shifted inside Elena then. A click. A sharp internal turn. She wasn't going to scream. She wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to let them choose the moment of confrontation. She would choose it. She would design it. She would control every second of it. And for the first time since she opened that email on David's laptop, Elena felt the faintest spark of power return to her. By the time she drove back toward the city, a plan had already begun forming. Cold, methodical, impossibly precise. A double reveal. Not a fight. Not a dramatic explosion. A moment of truth that neither of them could escape. She began with David. That afternoon, she greeted him with a soft tone and a tired smile. "I think we need a weekend away," she told him. "Just the two of us. We've been drifting. I don't want to lose us." David blinked in surprise. Then relief. Then guilt, the kind that flickers too fast to hide. "Really?" he asked. "You planned something?" "Yes," she said, lowering her gaze just enough to seem vulnerable. "I booked a room at the Royal Crest. I just want to feel close again." He hugged her, lightly, awkwardly, and she let him. He didn't know she had used his credit card. He didn't know she chose the exact suite he had taken Rachel to. He didn't know what awaited him. Next came Rachel. Elena used a different phone number and texted her as if she were the hotel manager offering a complimentary spa day to a recent guest chosen for a promotional event. Rachel responded within minutes, grateful, excited, unsuspecting. Elena stared at the message for a long moment before locking the phone. The pieces were falling into place. The next step was evidence. She printed every screenshot, every bank transaction, every photo. She bought a small voice recorder and slipped it into her purse. She borrowed a discreet camera from a coworker who used it for real estate showings, one designed to sit innocently on a shelf without drawing attention. Every move intentional, every detail precise. Not revenge. Consequences. That was the difference. She wasn't trying to hurt them. They had already done that. She was simply making sure their truth had nowhere to hide. That night, she drove to the Royal Crest early. The room was exactly as she remembered from the photos. Gold pillows, soft lighting, a rose placed neatly on the bed. She set the camera on the small table, angled perfectly, tested the recorder, placed the envelope of evidence inside her bag. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and waited. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. The fear was gone. All that remained was a strange, steady detachment. As if she were watching her life from the outside, preparing to walk into a moment she had already rehearsed in her mind 100 times. At exactly 4:55 p.m., her phone buzzed. A message from David. "On my way up." She stood, smoothed her blouse, and looked at her reflection in the mirror. She didn't look broken. She didn't look devastated. She looked ready. Ready to end this chapter. Ready to face them. Ready to reclaim the story of her own life. And as the clock on the nightstand ticked toward 5 p.m., Elena understood something with absolute clarity. Her life was about to split into two halves, the part before the door opened and the part after it closed. The moment the clock struck 5, everything shifted. In the stillness of the Royal Crest suite, Elena stood completely composed, hands resting lightly at her sides. The camera's small red light glowed from the table, recording the room where her marriage had unraveled, the same room David believed she had chosen for reconciliation. But this wasn't reconciliation. This was truth. A soft knock sounded at the door. Part 3 ended with anticipation. Part 4 began with the opening of that door. David stepped inside first. He spotted Elena standing near the window and paused, visibly relieved that she wasn't crying or angry. "Hey," he said, forcing a warm tone he hadn't used in months. "You look better than I expected. Did you check in smoothly?" "Yes," Elena replied, her voice steady. "Everything is ready." He smiled, the kind that tried too hard. "Good. I really think this weekend is what we need." Elena watched him walk farther into the suite, the same suite he had shared with her sister. She wondered if he recognized the pillows, the lighting, the scent of the room. If he did, he hid it well. David had always been good at hiding things. "Do you want to talk now?" he asked. "We will," she said softly. "We're waiting for one more person." Before he could question her, another knock echoed. This one quick, impatient, almost excited. David froze. Elena didn't move as she opened the door. Rachel walked in with a bright smile, the kind people wear when they think they've walked into luxury, until she saw Elena standing in the center of the room. Her smile collapsed. Her entire body stiffened, turning to stone in an instant. "Elena, what are you doing here?" she whispered. David looked between them, panic rising behind his eyes. "Wait, Rachel, what? Why are?" But Elena didn't let their confusion tangle into excuses. She closed the door with a quiet click. "This," she said calmly, "is exactly the place both of you chose. I just came to finish what you started." Neither spoke. Rachel's breath hitched. David's shoulders dropped as if gravity had doubled. Elena reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope. She set it on the table between them, the sound of paper hitting would slicing through the room. "These are the bank statements, the photos, the reservations, the messages you tried to hide," she said. "Everything you've done. Everything you thought I would never find." Rachel's face drained of color. David swallowed hard, jaw tightening. They didn't reach for the envelope. Neither wanted to touch the truth they had created. Elena didn't need them to. She gestured to the camera. "I want both of you to look here. Just once." David's voice cracked first. "Elena, please. We can talk about this at home. Don't do something you'll regret." She met his gaze with a calmness he had never seen from her. "David, I don't regret anything. That's the difference between us." Rachel stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Elena, please listen. I wasn't trying to hurt you. It just happened. I was lonely. I made mistakes. But we can fix this. We can fix." "No," Elena said softly. "You don't get to rewrite this." She turned slightly, positioning herself in front of the camera. Her voice didn't rise. Her anger didn't explode. Her heartbreak didn't choke her. She was steady, controlled, final. "You both destroyed my family," she said, her tone as sharp as clean glass. "But from this moment on, neither of you have the right to touch my life anymore." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't theatrical. It was a quiet execution of truth, the kind that leaves no room for denial. David stepped forward, desperation leaking into his voice. "Elena, we can fix us. There is no us anymore," she said, turning her back to them and picking up her bag. "And the sad part is, you chose that the moment you touched my sister." Rachel looked as if something inside her had shattered. "Elena, please don't go. Don't leave me like this." Elena paused at the door, her hand resting on the handle. She glanced back, not with love, not with hatred, but with a kind of exhausted clarity. "You left me first," she said. "Both of you did." And then she stepped out of the suite, closing the door behind her, leaving David and Rachel standing in the room where their lies had once thrived. The aftermath unfolded with predictable precision. Elena filed for divorce the next week. The financial documents spoke for themselves. David had used money from their joint account to fund his affair. His attorney advised him to settle quietly. The scandal was too big to fight. At work, word spread fast. He didn't admit everything, but humiliation doesn't need confession. It only needs truth. As for Rachel, the fallout was worse. Their mother cut ties completely. Their relatives followed. Friends who once pitted her divorce now whispered about the affair behind closed doors. Rachel's reputation collapsed in slow, painful pieces, the price of betraying the one person who stood by her for years. Meanwhile, Elena moved into a small rental near the lake. Quiet, clean, facing the water. She worked, she healed, she reclaimed the parts of herself she had abandoned. Some people choose silence because they are weak. Elena chose silence because it was stronger than screaming. And in the end, it became her greatest weapon. Her final lesson wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple, a truth carved into the new life she built. Some people choose silence to endure. Elena chose silence to end it. And sometimes, that silence is the loudest thunder in the room.